All right, so now we looked at an older Vidums notebook. Now let's take a look at this one that I made just for this class. A reminder, the Vidums notebook is better for stuff you're trying to do linear, like you're trying to take an existing linear sort of narrative or linear process, and all you're trying to do is like stretch and shrink like the actual frames. So you can hold a frame for a little bit longer, but you can't resequence it. This notebook will allow you to do resequencing and some other things. We'll take a look at this now. So you don't need a GPU for this. So let's just go ahead and reconnect to our notebook here, and then we'll run and connect to Google Drive. I actually won't use Drive for this, but if your files are there, you can go ahead and connect to it to find access to it. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I've got 3 clips I want to show. So I've got these like synchronized swimmer clips that I think will be kind of fun and maybe a little bit of a homage to Betty Gordon, even though it's not a diver, it's a synchronized swimmer. I'll just drag these into this left-hand panel here in Colab, and it'll upload them. Now the important thing to think about as we do this process is also like to understand a little bit about what's going on in the actual film clips. So this might look familiar. This is from week 2 where we used FFmpeg to sort of understand a little bit about our clips. Since I'm not going to be accessing our database, actually I'm just going to look at this live using the clips I'm uploading now. So I'm going to run this cell just to save those functions. And then once we're uploaded here, I'm going to grab these files and look at them. So let's take a look at this one. One thing to be aware of is this notebook is a little slow because, well, it depends a lot on what you're working with. So I generally recommend working with shorter clips just for your own sanity. Don't work with an hour-long clip. It's going to be really hard, or you're going to be waiting a long time. I think these clips are all between like 20 and 30 seconds. Let's see. This one is 20 seconds, 26 seconds. This one is 21. And this one is 26. And I believe these are all 1920 by 1080. Let me just double check that. Yes, 1920 by 1080. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to convert all these clips into individual frames, and then we're going to resequence those frames according to some of the programmatic stuff we're going to set here. Converting these to individual frames is slow. It's going to take a couple minutes for each clip. If you wanted to do this more often, I would recommend saving those to your Google Drive account. Actually, maybe that's what I'll do in this session. That way I've got access to them again, but it will also fill up your Drive account because they're fairly large files. If you want this to happen faster, work with lower resolution files or shorter clips. Let's see where we're at here. Still uploading, okay. Okay, that's finished uploading. You'll see I've got my files here now, swim 1, 2, and 3. And just to remind people, this cell, if I copy the path from here and paste this in, and I run this, this will output all the stuff we've done before, right? So my duration, my dimensions, and my frame per second. Now this is obviously shot by someone in Europe because it's 25 frames per second instead of 24, and the duration is 26 seconds. So these 2 numbers are going to become important to us. Here's why. If I run this next cell, this will give us the duration times the FPS, and that will tell us how many frames are actually in this clip. Now, this might be off by 1 or 2 in either direction because of how all this gets calculated, but anyway, we know we're working with about 650 frames, and that will allow us to figure out sequences and that sort of thing. So I do recommend, maybe you do the Rose Louder thing of like actually drawing out your frames, or at least think about sequencing on the frame level here. Okay, so let's take a look at this first section. So this first section allows us to take one video. It's important, it's only one video, and allows us to reorder based on a length of a certain clip, and then give it an order sequence. So let's go through these cells one by one. So first thing we want to do is we want to upload our clip path. So I'm going to work off of, let's work off of clip 2. Actually, let me look here. Let's work off of swim 3. Okay, so we'll copy our path to swim 3. And then we want to give this an output location, so let's call it swim 3, and I'll just say ordered. Frames per second, you can change this if you want to. I'd probably recommend leave it at 25. That's going to be the same speed as then that other video. Next, we have our frame length. So this is how long of a section should we be cutting out per sequence. So at 12 frames, it's going to be about half a second. Not exactly because we're at 25, but you can't do halves. You have to do full integers. So we'll do 12 or we would do 13. 12 seems to be, I'm an American, so I always think in 24 frames per second, so 12 works well for me. So this is going to be half a second. And this next section here is the order that we want to set these sequences in. So the way to think about this is, if we break up our clip into 12 segments, or 12 frames per segment, how many segments does that give us? So that gives us 650 by 12. So that gives us 54 segments. So the 53rd segment, remember we're working in 0 indexes, so the 0 index would be my first 12 frames of my clip. 53 in 0 base would be the last-ish 12 frames of my clip. Now this is not exact. You'll see here we have a little bit of overage. Nothing we can really do about that in this particular cell. So we've got 54 clips. So now what I can do is I can write a sequence here. So again, almost like an optical printer, we can input in like the, okay, what sequence do I want to play? So let's say I want to start with the first sequence, so that'd be 0. Then I'm going to enter a space, and let's say I want the last sequence, so that'd be 53. Then maybe I want the first sequence again, and then I want the next to last, 251, 350. So this will give me the first 12 frames, the last 12 frames, the second 12 frames, second from last, third, on and on and on. So this is going to sort of jump between the beginning of the clip and the end of the clip. Now the other thing you should know here is that if you put things back in sequence, like say I do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because they're all in sequence, it's actually going to just play the clip again. So if you want that sort of like stuttery effect, you kind of want to avoid this, but I kind of like mixing up like a little bit of like some stutter and a little bit of smooth. It feels like, and it makes everything a little bit like sort of like jumpy, smooth, jumpy, smooth. But this is essentially how you write a sequence. So the important thing is you do have to know how many clips you have here. There's a ton of different ways you could approach this. There's other algorithms we could write here. We could have this sort of automate it for us. We could start to play with forwards and backwards and changing out the sequence length. But I think it's good to start playing with these sequences with like a little bit of like sort of repetition and like a frequent rhythm. But then, so the rhythm is consistent, but then like what's changing is what's on screen. Okay, so at this point I think we're ready to run this. So now we can run this cell. Now this might take a couple minutes because it's going to take my video clip, split it out into all of the requisite parts and requisite frames, and then it's going to resequence it according to this structure, put it back together, turn it back into a video, and then save it. So I'm going to stop the video here just because I think this might take a couple minutes, and when it's finished I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so that finished and I've already downloaded the file, so let's take a look at it and see what it looks like. Alright, so there you go. You'll see at the beginning it starts by jumping between different clips. But then this part is fluid, and if you look again, that's because we've got our ordered sequence here where we start to order things in the same order that they are essentially cut up in. So you get that sort of jumping around and then you get that smooth flow. One thing I should also mention is I did find a bug in this program, or not really a bug, but just anyway, remember how I said that this is probably not an accurate number? So if you take the duration times the frames per second, you'll get a number. This is probably not an accurate number, and in fact I had done 650 divided by 12 to give me this number. Well, it turned out that when I actually processed the clip and converted it into every individual frame, there were only, I believe, 640 or 643 clips in it. And if you use 643 divided by 12, you get 53. So I had in here initially 53, which meant that it was looking for frames that didn't exist. So I had to shift everything down a little bit. So it's probably good to sort of like take half a second off of this frame count. So that would be, 638 or somewhere around there, just to be safe. So I had to play with this number a little bit. I kept getting an error message. If you get a similar error message, let me know. We can figure that out. But yeah, so probably just be a little bit on the cautious side with this frame count number. Or when you do this number, subtract 2 from it and remove the anything after the decimal point, and you probably are safe there. Okay, so that created our video clip. Now I should mention one other thing about this. This will obviously, like if I change this amount, if I go to this, and I add my code cell back here, and let's do 643 divided by 6, this changes your number, right? So the frame length determines how many sequences you have potentially here. Now you could even turn this into a frame by frame sequencer by changing this to 1, and then you would have 643 numbers to play with. So you could do 1, 643, 2, 642. You could write this out. I would probably make a little code snippet to actually generate this for me, but you could do this. Now, I personally find 1 frame at 24 frames a second too flickery. It just moves really, really quickly. In general, I kind of like 2 as like a good number. It's a little bit easier to sort of see what's going on, and it's a little bit less flickery. Do whatever you want to do, but you could turn this into a frame sequencer and then generate some sort of sequence using another line of Python or something. But you could generate something kind of interesting there. So just be aware of that. I'm going to set this back to 12 and set this to, what was it, 0, 52, 1, 51, 50. So you could imagine generating a sequences of different things, or finding a random number generator to generate random sequences. So that is the one video sequence, and again, remember that only works with one video. It chops it up and allows you to play with things. Now what you could do, if you wanted multiple videos, you could actually like stitch them together using like a concatenation script or dumping them into QuickTime or something, and then run the sequence on all those combined clips, and then play with different ordering sequences. Now the only problem is one of those sequences is probably going to have like your actual cut in it. Maybe that's a problem, maybe it's not, but there are ways around this, but I find this is like a nice simple way to get started. Okay, so let's take a look at one more option here, which is interleaving multiple scenes. This is more like the Rose Lowder thing. Now Rose Lowder obviously shot them like that. She would cover her camera, shoot a black frame, and then a month later she would go in and fill in that frame with another shot. For us digitally, it's kind of easy for us to stitch clips together by pulling them apart, combining them into little sequences, and then putting them back together. So that's what we're going to do here. So in this case, what I've done is I'm going to copy in all of my paths. So this first line here, what you need to do is you need to wrap your path in quotes, put a comma, and then wrap your next path in quotes, and 3. So just make sure they're all in quotes and they are comma separated. If they're not comma separated, you'll probably get an error message. In fact, you definitely will. You can add any number of clips, so if you want to add 10 clips, whatever, just know that order does actually matter here. So it is always going to play these back in this order. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3. So just be aware of that. FPS, I'm going to keep it at the same rate the video is shown at. That way it keeps a sort of consistent speed. Next we have frame length here. So this is when we interleave all these pieces, right? We're going to make a 3-frame cut of swim 1. Then we're going to paste on a 3-frame cut of swim 2. We're going to paste on a 3-frame cut of swim 3. You could do 2 frames. You could do 1 frame. 1 frame is going to be crazy, but let's look at it and see what happens. So then I'm going to save this out as 1 frame. Last is this button for maintain clip speed. If this is on, then what is going to happen here, remember we talked about this sort of in the lecture, is that this will maintain the speed of your clip, meaning you will drop frames. So if this is set to 1 frame, you will drop frame, you'll keep frame 1 of swim 1, then you will drop 2 frames to put in swim 2 and swim 3, and then you'll come back to frame 4. So what will happen here is the length of this video will be the shortest, whatever your shortest clip is here. So remember one of these was like 21 seconds. It will be the shortest length of your clips. If you turn this off, it will keep every single frame, but it will still stack them in the right order. Meaning it will still go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 from each of these clips. But we're going to use all the frames up until a certain point when one of the buckets runs out. So this will be essentially 3 times, or like however many clips you have, as long as your shortest clip. I tend to like this. I feel like this feels right because the speed is still consistent, but you do drop a lot of frames. So if you're trying to be efficient with your clip footage, that sort of thing, this is the way to go. Okay, now we're set to run this. I'm going to run this, but I'm definitely going to stop the video because it's going to take a little bit of time to process this. Same thing is going to happen here. We're going to convert each one of these clips into individual frames. So now we're going to take the process that happened above, but we're going to do it for every clip. It's going to take probably about 10 or 15 minutes to generate this. So I'll run this, and then when I come back, we'll take a look at what the output was. Okay, so that took about 12 minutes to run. Maybe thinking to yourself, 12 or 13 minutes for a 20-second clip feels very long, and unfortunately it is, but this is kind of the tool set we have available to us. So let's take a look at what it looks like. Warning, it is very flickery, so if that is not your thing, look away now. So again, I think it's a little too flickery for me. I think 2 frames per second would have been better. But you do kind of get this nice sort of strobing effect of all these things moving. And they are moving at the speed of this clip, so you do actually sort of see people moving up and down, and there's kind of this nice little rhythm to it. But that's that. So in general, I would probably recommend leaving this at 2 and outputting it with the name of 2. But you can do whatever you want. Anyway, I think there's some cool stuff to be made here, especially if you find interesting clips to work with. Like I would think it'd be really interesting if you found, even looking at our own data sets, like finding shots that either are match cuts or are, similar shot types, and flickering between like a close shot of different people's faces. You get some really nice effects there. Lots of options, but I think this will be kind of cool to play with. So play around with it. If you do make anything interesting, please definitely share it in our Slack channel. And with this, let's move on to actually looking at how to do audio reactive work. So we'll move over to that tutorial now.